But I'll say it straight, it's never too late to wake up, live into your dream. Who among us knows how it feels to be all in the flow? Your life moving swiftly like a river. Well, maybe you've already flown and you're happy with a life that moves slow. That's fine, please take your time. There's an infinite supply of ways to deliver the most excellent and divinely lived life. Live fully and powerfully, even in the midst of life's strife, with the angels singing in the heavens, bringing you higher. That's the game I'm playing, and from this course I'll not be straying till the day I die. Well, who among us knows how far into the light one can go? Tell me, whom of us has made the leap and lived to tell it? I'm asking to get clear. Is there a faultless one among us here? And if not, then how about you and I jump into the fray and live the most excellent and divinely lived life? Live fully and powerfully, even in the midst of life's strife, with the angels singing in the heavens, bringing us higher. That's the game we can play when you and I are willing to say, okay, I surrender, 'cause I'm not in control, and I know that in the divine flow I am everything. I am everything. Come on, sing it with me. I am everything. I am everything. Honestly, I am everything. I am everything. One more time around. I am everything. So who among us knows everything that could be to know? And who can lead humanity to the light? Well, I find it's happening naturally, it's each and every day, and I do mean every. I take the time to ponder what it looks like when the most excellent and divinely lived life, lived fully and powerfully, even in the midst of life's strife, with the angels singing in the heavens, bringing us higher. See, there's gold to be found within. Sing it with me. There's gold to be found within.
Beautiful. Yeah, what he said. Wow. Happy Sunday. Shawn, thank you so much, and just so tickled you could be with us here today. I had a little snafu this week, and I was glad we were able to work it out, and we will have Billy Winston again another time, so he's... Anyway, good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. I came across a story as I was preparing my lesson this week. Believe it or not. Yeah, there was a young lad, he was about 7 years old, and he went into his room and he picked up a baseball bat and 3 balls. And he marched outside and he said, "I am a hitter." And he tossed the ball up in the air and he swung and he missed. And he said, "Strike one." And then he took another ball and he tossed it up in the air and he swung and he missed. And strike 2. He said, "I am the greatest hitter ever. I am the best hitter in the world." And he took the last ball and he tossed it up in the air and he swung and he missed. And he said, "Man, I'm a great pitcher." Woo! And there was a young salesman who walked into another story, walked up into receptionist and asked to see the company sales manager. And he was ushered into the office and he said, I don't suppose, sir, that you'd like to buy some life insurance, do you? And the man said, "No," he replied, the manager said, and he says, I don't think so. And as the young man says, "Well, okay." And as he got up to leave, he said, "Wait a minute, son." His sales manager said to him, "I want to talk to you. He said, "Sit down again." And he says, "Obviously you're new at this, and I want to help you out by I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sign up for a $10,000 policy. But I want you to know that you need some work on your sales presentation here, young man. What you have to do is you have to develop a few standard sales pitches that you can give to people so that they are more interested in signing up for what you're selling." And the young man said, "Well, I thank you, sir. I appreciate that feedback, but I have a really good one that just worked. It's the one I do for sales managers." So as I was, reflecting on, meditating on what I wanted to speak on today, I got in my meditation that phrase, building spiritual confidence. And what it spurred it, I think, was that something I was reading about developing self-confidence. And I think self-confidence is important and valuable, but one of the things that came into my mind and the question that came to me is, what is the self that we have confidence in? What is the self that we have confidence in? What's the self that you have confidence in? And one of the things that we learn is that in unity we understand that we have what's a self with a small s, and we have a self with a large S. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want to talk a little bit about what it means to have confidence. So the 2 things that we want to talk about today is, 1, what is confidence? And 2, what is it that we truly have confidence in? And I looked up just the definition of confidence in Webster, and it says a feeling or belief that you can do something well or succeed at something. A feeling or belief that someone or something is good or has the ability to succeed at something. And then the third definition was the feeling of being certain that something will happen or that something is true. So I was thinking about these ideas of confidence, and when you have confidence in something, it really resonates with the understanding that you know that there is truth in it, that it is something that you can count on, something that you can depend on. Wouldn't you agree? And as you think about what is it in your life that you really have confidence in? We have confidence in a lot of things, and most of those things are actually things out here in the world, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if that is something that we use as the source of our confidence, then we're probably going to find that the ground at times will get shaky. Jesus said, build your house on a rock. And what he's referring to is the rock of spiritual truth, the rock of spiritual principles, because there are those who build their house on sand. You remember that story? Man built his house on sand, and as the winds came and the waters came, it washed it away. How many times do we build our sense of self-worth, our sense of well-being, our sense of good, our sense of our source, for that matter, on things out here that really are temporary, that are not necessarily going to always be there for us? And so part of our spiritual development is to recognize what is the self that I'm putting my confidence in. Sue Sicking, in a wonderful book called Only Believe. Sue Sicking was a very well-known and respected Unity teacher and minister for many, many years. And she wrote this wonderful book called Only Believe, and I've read it a number of times, and each time I get new awareness and new insight and inspiration. And she said each one of us has what appears to be two selves, our everyday outer self with personality, and the one we were created to be, the self we are unfolding, bringing forth into manifestation with moment-by-moment living. Our purpose in life is to evolve and unfold our being and to follow a perfect pattern. And she goes on to say, the new being that is unfolding within us will be born from the union of two principles, God and man, outer self and inner self, forming one new complete being, the grand man. Everyone of us will die to the limited personal self we think that we are, and become alive to a completely new being, a superman or woman, a superman or superwoman. This is a tantalizing glimpse of what is now at hand. In the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, Charles Fillmore says, until man realizes that his strength is spiritual, it cannot become abiding and unfailing and enduring. And so what we're really talking about is beginning to shift our understanding about the idea of self-confidence and begin to recognize that the self that we really need to have confidence is our spiritual self. Begin to see ourselves more as our spiritual nature. Begin to expand the possibilities that our mind holds of who and what we are into a greater knowing that we are created in the image and after the likeness of that which creates the universe, stars, even down to the tiniest molecule or quark. That's a term I learned in physics. Some of you know about that. Not sure what it is. I'm not sure they know what it is, but it's something that they talk about as being one of the smallest. And there is a power and an energy and an intelligence and a force in and through the universe and through all things. And you and I were created in the image and after the likeness of that. So we were created from that. In fact, there's absolutely no way that you and I can be something outside of that, because there's only one presence and one power, as we talk about. It's in and of everything. And so we are part of that, as our daily word said this morning. And so we're learning to tap into this understanding. Another aspect of confidence, of course, is the divine power. In Unity, we talk about this understanding that we have 12 main spiritual qualities or characteristics. We call them the 12 powers. Charles Fillmore wrote this wonderful work called The 12 Powers of Man, and that's humankind, not just males. And so we each have these unique spiritual qualities. And as I began to think about this, each of these qualities was represented by one of the 12 disciples in Scripture. But it also is are qualities that are part of and make up what we refer to as the Christ. Now, in unity, we understand that Jesus is one who represents and showed us the amazing divine connection that we have with the Father. He said, the Father and I are one, and you and I are one. And so part of our understanding is that we are all a part of this divine creative principle that is continually creating, that's continually creating our experiences, continually creating our lives. And we are a part of that process of allowing something greater than our limited thoughts and thinking to come in and through us. And by doing so, we expand our energy, our consciousness, our awareness, and our identification of who and what we've come, of what we are. Faith is a part of confidence. Belief is a part of confidence. And so as we expand our faith, we actually are expanding our confidence in something greater than our limited beliefs and thinking. In the Atom Smashing Power of Mind, Charles Fillmore said, faith is the highest expression or belief or confidence. And faith is one of those divine qualities that I was talking about. We'll talk more about these different divine qualities, and strength is certainly one of those, and confidence is, it is an expression of strength also, if you think about it. So one of those divine qualities is strength. And confidence is something that allows us to express strength, and strength actually allows us to be and feel more confident, right? So in John chapter 15, verse 1 through 8, Jesus said, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples, and this brings great glory to the Father. So I want to say a little bit about this because I think it's important to kind of understand. It has been traditionally taught that this is Jesus talking of himself, and that we are to somehow, what's the best way I put it? Metaphysically, one of the things we understand is that when Jesus is talking in Scripture, he talks oftentimes from two places. Sometimes he's talking from his human self. Do you realize that? And sometimes he's talking as the Christ within himself. He's talking from that place within him where he knows and experiences and feels and is connected fully with his oneness with the divine. The Christ within. Yeah. So for those of you who are not aware, Christ is not Jesus' last name. I'm sorry if it bothers some of you, but it's not. Christ is not Jesus' last name. Christ is that perfect idea in the mind of God that you and I, humankind, were created to express and to be. Come on in, folks. He was one who showed us and demonstrated for us a consciousness that was in harmony and alignment with that divine nature, with the Christ. And so he received the title of being the Christ, because he showed that to us in such a powerful way. And he expressed a oneness with that divine nature in such a way that it woke so many of us up. In fact, I'd say it really woke up humanity in many ways to another level of awareness and possibility. And so what he's saying here is, think about this as you're listening, hear this as being the Christ speaking in and to and through you. Listen within yourself and hear it from that space. I am the true grapevine. That divine nature within you is speaking that to you right now. I am the vine. And there is that which is higher, of course, which is the Father, which is the wholeness of the creative being, of the creative life, of God. And there is one aspect of us that is, he says, he cuts off every branch with that it doesn't produce fruit. So what I'm hearing in this is that there are aspects of our identification that really do not continue to bear life or fruit. Our personality. Our personality is here today and gone tomorrow, isn't it? This personal self of me will not continue. But there is a unique individuality of me. There's a unique individuality of you that is eternal and always has been and always will be. And you will always continue to hold and express through that in some way. So the personality of me has certain thoughts and ideas about myself. It believes that I am a body. It believes that I am of my thoughts. It believes that I am what I feel. It believes that I am what some people tell me that I am. Right? This is what the personality does. Some people, the Course in Miracles talks about it in terms of the ego consciousness. There's an ego consciousness within either one of us, a personality consciousness, and that will pass away. You know, the ego doesn't like to hear that. Really doesn't like that very much. And the ego does all kinds of wonderful things to try to protect itself from that thought or that belief system or that idea. And it tries to show us and teach us all kinds of things that we are, and it really does perpetuate this idea or this belief system that we are things that are limited, that are fearful, that are full of worry and doubts and anxieties, and you know what I'm talking about? And yet there's a part of us that is continually speaking to us that has and knows that ultimately we are created in the image. We are spiritual beings. We are spiritual beings, and we do have and sometimes express through our personalities, but the personality is not the wholeness of us. It's not the fullness of it. It's just simply a way that we have believed ourselves to be. So, another Unity teacher, Eric Butler, says, true self-confidence springs from a realization of that Christ in us, the divine self. While we can and may depreciate ourselves or our abilities, we cannot depreciate that Christ nature. And so one of the things that allows us to experience more of that Christ nature is being willing to set aside this idea or this belief that we have to somehow fix the world. Or even more sometimes that we have to fix each other. Or we have to fix ourselves. I can tell you, when we have these kinds of thoughts, it doesn't come from our divine nature, because the reality is our divine nature already knows the truth of who and what we are, already knows the truth of the world. Julie and I were studying another work recently, last night as a matter of fact. We were looking at Dr. Sarno's work. Many of you familiar, and we were introduced that by Verlinda and Billy. And one of the things that his teachings, and there's just some great truth in what he's teaching, and he's teaching about how to heal specifically back pain. And as so many of you know, I've been working with doing some healing work around that. And one of the things that he points out is that the underlying cause of all of our, almost all of our dis-ease has to do with stress. Now that's not a new idea, but he kind of boils it down to a particular term or a word. And some of you may immediately recognize this, or some of you may not. But he says underneath, in our unconscious, we all have rage. Some of a few throats clearing, And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, well, I don't know that I feel rage. And then I thought, yeah, maybe, I better think about that. But what occurred to me and one of the things that came to me actually as I was waking up this morning, I kind of sometimes lay there and meditate a little while before I get out of bed. And what came to me is that anytime that we are resisting the world, anytime we're resisting the world, it's going to create a feeling and a sense of frustration and rage within us. Because the world already is what it is. Think about that for a moment. When we're resisting what is, it's going to generate feelings of frustration and rage, isn't it? And so part of our shifting is beginning to recognize that we don't change the world by resisting it. We don't change the world by trying to make it different than it already is. Because the world that already is like a ripple of something that's already been held in consciousness. Does that make sense? And so the only thing we can do to really shift and change what's going on in our lives and our world is to change what's going on in our energy and our consciousness right now in this moment. Because what's going on right now in this moment is what will be showing up in our next moment, or the one after that, or the one after that. Now, it may not happen. Sometimes it's like, as I tell people, sometimes changing consciousness is like turning the Titanic, It's like you see you're headed for a iceberg, but sometimes, you're set on a path, and it's hard. It seems like there's a challenge trying to make that turn. It can be done, but the only time it can be done is right now. So, Charles Fillmore says, it's good to recall pleasant and profitable visions of the past. They act as stimulators and bolster our courage and show a way of proceeding for new venture. And so one of the things that he's talking about is that think about those times and those experiences where you have experienced a successful experience, an experience that was uplifting, an experience that was positive, an experience that was life-enhancing, as we sometimes talk about, and reflect on those and spend time and energy reflecting on those. But he's also implying to not do that for those that were not uplifting. Don't spend your time and energy right now thinking about the past that was not good, that you didn't want, because what you're really doing in that moment is you're creating a future that you don't want. And so part of our learning to live in an energy of spiritual consciousness is recognizing that conscious participation in the creative process of what's coming and what can be and what's possible. Again, Sue Sicking in that same book said, the world will be brought forth by men and women who have the courage to look through appearances to the impossible dream, and by those who will know that the dream is possible. By those who will know that the dream is possible. See, confidence is also one of the ways that we pray in unity, isn't it? We talk about unity in terms of affirmative prayer. We talk about affirmative prayer because we know that what we hold in consciousness in such a way that we accept that it is true, then it actually becomes our experience. Now, let me clarify something. Just holding a thought does not necessarily make it true. You follow me? But when you hold a thought of truth, you're actually drawing more of that experience of truth into your energy, into your experiences, and into your awareness. We do affirmations, and I could say all day long, I'm a purple pig, I'm a purple pig, I'm a purple pig, I'm a purple pig. Now, some of you may begin to see me that way if I continue to say that, and I may begin to believe that about myself, and I may begin to do things that make me really look like a purple pig. Right? But that's not the truth, is it? So saying something over and over again, an affirmation over and over again, is not necessarily going to bring into our experiences the truth. So an affirmation is speaking a statement of truth over and over again. And that's one of the ways that we do really learn to build our spiritual self-confidence, and that is to continually use words that affirm our spiritual, unique, divine nature, that really tune us into that individuality that is in every one of us, that each one of us has to share and to express in the world. That often does require courage, if you think about it. Another aspect of self-confidence really is courage, isn't it? Spiritual confidence itself requires courage because it requires us to be willing to let the ego go. Not always an easy thing. We get so identified with who we think we are out here in the world and who we think we're supposed to be that we sometimes lose sight of and track of who we truly are. In another Eric Butterworth quote, he says, "Courage and fear are not opposites. Courage does not mean the absence of fear, but its subordination." I'll say that again because that's important, I think. Courage and fear are not opposites. Courage does not mean the absence of fear, but its subordination. So it doesn't mean that we're not going to have fears in our life, but it means that we're not going to allow those fears to be in charge of our life. Got any fears that are running you right now? Yeah, we do, don't we? Think about it. So part of our work in overcoming and developing our spiritual confidence is being willing to look at and face those things that seem to be most fearful to us. And one of the great exercises we had in our 4T Prosperity class this week talked about a wonderful classic Star Trek episode. Anybody here watch the old Star Trek shows? Most of you have, many of you, some of you probably haven't, but that's okay. I can kind of describe this episode. James Kirk, the captain, and Spock were on a mission, and what they saw was that their shipmates had been captured, and they were at the end of this tunnel, and they were being tortured. And Captain Kirk and Spock were rushing there to try and rescue them. And as they're rushing along, Spock just immediately goes ahead, and Kirk is like stuck, and he's like he can't go any further. And he's like a mime in front of this barrier. And he couldn't understand why he couldn't go any further, and he couldn't understand why he and Spock was able to. And so he yelled out to Spock, wait a minute, how come you can go through this and I can't? And Spock says, well, it's an anxiety barrier. It blocks out anything that is holding anxiety, the energy of anxiety. And so he said, drop your anxiety. Kirk was very anxious about his people. He said, drop your anxiety and you'll be able to pass through. So Kirk stopped. He took a moment, got peaceful, and was able to walk right through. Man, what a great metaphor for so many things in our lives. Think about it. So many things in our lives. Are there things in your life where you run up against the anxiety barrier? What you'll find is if you can move back into that place within yourself where you know and feel that oneness with Spirit, it'll allow you to move through those experiences. It'll allow you to move through that barrier. And it'll help you to move into another level of awareness so that you are not necessarily focused on and tuned into the energy of the anxiety, but you're tuned into the energy and the consciousness of well-being. And the energy and consciousness of well-being is actually the very vibration and energy of our divine nature, isn't it? Charles Fillmore also says, all men have within them the divine source of courage. And when we learn how to draw upon this inner reserve, we shall find that we have more courage to express than we have even dreamed. Courage and fear are not opposites, as he said. And then I got this other Eric Butterworth awareness. Until man realizes that his strength is spiritual, it cannot become abiding, unfailing, and enduring. When we look to that spiritual part of ourselves and we're faced with a circumstance or situation, you know, one of the things that we do, and I realized that the last 2 Sundays I've forgotten to do it. I just get distracted by all the greetings and the hugs, but we usually do a circle out here and we do a prayer. And one of the things we do every Sunday is we affirm it is not I, but the Spirit of God within that does the work. And we do that for a couple of reasons, and it's to help me to recognize it's not I, but it's also to help us all recognize that there's something more within us than that's going on in our personality consciousness, and that we allow that to come through. And when we do, there's an uplifting of energy and consciousness and spirit within every one of us that moves us into another level. One of the things that Paul said about Jesus, the Christ, is that he said, Christ, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. This is in Philippians chapter 2, verse 6. Being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. The verse actually says, have in you this mind which was in Christ Jesus, who thought it not robbery to be equal with God. I think it's a very powerful verse in Scripture. Have in you this mind, this way of thinking, this way of understanding, this way of experiencing, who thought it was not robbery. In other words, he wasn't stealing anything. He wasn't trying to take anything. He was just, that's what he was. And it was his example in this. And Paul was saying, have in that same mind in you. Have that same mind in you. So how do we do that? How do we have that same mind in us? Well, think about this in terms of your own unique divine nature. Have in you that awareness and that willingness to allow yourself to be all that you possibly can be in life, and let yourself move forward in ways that are beyond your anxiety barriers, beyond your limiting beliefs about yourself, beyond all of the shoulds that you have accepted, beyond all the yell buts that come up from our unconscious mind. Have in you that mind in you that was in Christ Jesus, who thought it not robbery to be equal with the divine. Another way of understanding that and saying is to be one with Spirit, to be one with the divine. Have in you that mind that says, I am one with the Spirit of God. I am one with the creative power and principle of the universe. I am one with all that is possible for me to be. So I want to close. I want to give you something to consider here. Two things. Find the correct one. This is from our poet. Meister Eckhart was one of the great mystics of the 1300s, I believe. This one is to see as God sees. It is your destiny to see as God sees, to know as God knows, to feel as God feels. How is this possible? How? Because divine love cannot defy its very self. Divine love will be eternally true to its own being. And its being is giving all it can at the perfect moment. And the greatest gift God can give is His own experience. Every object, every creature, every man, woman, and child has a soul, and it is the destiny of all to see as God sees, to know as God knows, to feel as God feels, to be as God is. In closing, Marianne Williamson gave us a wonderful idea and awareness to really practice with. She said, our greatest fear is our light, not our darkness. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we liberate from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. That's your homework. Let your presence liberate not only yourself, but automatically liberating others. So, let's move into our meditation time. So take a nice deep breath now. Breathe into the heart space. And as you breathe in and out, allow your awareness to notice the breath. It's not necessarily to change it or regulate it, just notice it. And let the awareness within you expand and notice any thoughts that are going on. Any physical sensations. Relaxing the body temple if there are places that are tense. Let your awareness expand and notice if there are any emotions that are going on for you at this time. And notice whether you are able to observe your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations, or whether you are immersed in them. Are you immersed in your thinking, your feeling? Are you immersed in your physical sensations? Are you immersed in a particular identity of who you are? And just observe and notice. And as you observe and notice, begin to sink into an awareness of the one who is observing and noticing. Let that awareness expand within you. Feel and see and be that observing self. And feel the expansion of that observing self that is beyond the thoughts, beyond the feelings, beyond immersion in the sense world. And feel and be open to knowing and experiencing the connection of that observing self with the very creative principle and practice and energy and light and love that is the divine. And from this space, step into a knowing of your wholeness. Step into a knowing of the wisdom of the divine in you. Step into an acceptance of yourself as a divine being, a creative energy and light and source and power. Step into knowing of your wholeness, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. Feel what it feels like. Expand your willingness to step into that divine nature. And if that little voice inside of you begins to chatter and give you all kinds of yeah buts, just bless it and say thank you for sharing. And then move back into observing and then expanding and allowing yourself to feel and know the expansion of your divine nature, your oneness. Have in you that a mind that is the Christ mind. Of oneness with God. And know that it is not robbery. It is truth. Thank you, Blessed Spirit. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the awakening and expanding of that awareness of the Christ heart and mind. Take another nice deep breath. Take one more nice deep breath. And give thanks. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes.